And so I had that resilience in me to think I have to go forward, tackle this, hopefully find someone. I felt lonely at times.
Let's start this thing, Paul. Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to Ask the Joy podcast, a podcast where we aim to build better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, and speaking of mindset today, we're going to be talking about this topic around resilience.
Yes, resilience.
It's such a powerful thing to have, powerful skill. And we brought on a really special guest, a special guest of mine.
Special guest.
Special, a very special guest of mine. My mom, Ava Wong. Welcome.
Hello, Mum.
So we chose to bring her on because for me personally, I know that she's gone through a lot of challenges and just always manages to be able to bounce back from any situation that has occurred to her, and still such a happy and bright person. So we're going to pick her brain just to see how she works through what her mindset is like when she goes through these challenges, and get her to share some of those experiences. And we'll share some of ours too and discuss how we see resilience. So it's also going to be weird because I talked to my mom in Cantonese and we're doing this in English. So it's going to be a bit weird, but there's a first for everything.
You'd be right.
So did you want to introduce yourself, or did you want to go right into the topic?
Well, as my daughter said, I'm Amelia's mum. Thank you for inviting me into this podcast. So it is an interesting topic, resilience. Certainly a topic which has been throughout my life. Trying to go through resilience has been a challenge, not just for myself, but I know that resilience is a topic where every individual has some level of resilience in them.
Yeah. Before we get into talking about our challenges and things that taught us resilience, what does resilient mean for you guys?
What it means to me, I'll take the driver's seat. So putting on my seatbelt and buckling in.
Yeah, strap on, guys.
Yeah, so resilience to me is the ability to recalibrate from those moments where you are put down. So being able to recalibrate in the fact of understanding what your position is and moving forward from that. To me, that's what it is.
Yeah, I had something quite similar. So I would think resilience is no matter what difficult situation or challenge happens in your life, is to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
On the tub.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, if you're enclosed, you got nowhere to get out. You still got to see the light, right?
Yes.
So just seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and knowing that there's always a way, and there's always a way to get out, to always a way to move forward. That's what resilience is to me.
Very nice.
And Mum?
Well, I agree with both of you. It's obviously bouncing back, having the ability to bounce back in a difficult situation that you arises from. So it's having that ability to tackle those difficult situations and unfortunate situations as well, and soldier on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Soldier on.
Nice.
Soldier on.
I'll just share the definition that's online.
The true definition.
The true definition.
Well, yes,
so we've all got some good definitions of it, and it's quite similar to what the actual definition is. So it is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress. So just being adaptable, I guess, to the situation.
Yep. Which is true, right? When you're in those situations, it's really that. It's adapting to that moment in time.
Yeah, and what do you have to do at that point in time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So moving on to the big question though, what are the biggest moments, or some of the biggest moments, that we want to share about that has taught us resilience in our life?
Am I taking the driver's seat again? All right,
Yes,
roger that.
You're in the driver's seat. We're not changing.
The most, outside of my redundancy, that was pretty hectic. So that was, I spoke about this in a previous podcast episode, just in terms of what happened, what I did. So just being able to bounce back, understand what your purpose is, and setting the right intent to get into the next point of in terms of your chapter and your journey. That's probably one of the biggest ones that I've had to deal with. A second one that I thought about just then is actually having to announce to my dad that he had cancer. And I was in year 11 at the time. And I remember I had to take the call because I was the only person that could understand English properly. And I had to decipher what the doctor had to say to my dad. And during that time, it was always like, yeah, you see your friends and other family members who had to go through that same situation. You never think that you would too. But that moment happened to me.
So you had to like process the what's happening and also understand the situation and process what you're feeling and trying to tell your dad as
tell my
well.
dad, yeah, this is what they're saying. And it's harder for me because seeing my dad's expression in terms of his, I guess, emotions, it was quite difficult at the time. And me being a young teenager, I knew shit nothing. So it was very hard for me to process at the time.
Yeah. And that taught you like one of the biggest lessons of resilience, just being strong.
Yeah, being strong, being able to adapt to that moment, and really just moving forward, especially from a supporting point of view for my dad, that is, and the family. So,
what about you, Mum?
I think the biggest moment that comes to mind is my mum when she had mental health issues. And that was during the time when I was just in high school and prior to that. So it was a challenging time where I had to, reestablish in my mind what I needed to do to go through that particular situation with my mum's illness and also trying to help her at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think that was the biggest moment. The other one is then my dad also at the time was diagnosed with cancer. So that was another big moment for me, having to go through that and see through the challenges for someone I obviously had been with, as him being my dad, who has never had any health issues in his life. Having to see him go through the challenges because of not having any health issues before and what he had to go through was a challenge for us as a whole family and myself. What we had to recalibrate and think what and how I was to become a stronger person for him to go through his health challenges.
And also be strong for yourself, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely, when it's family, closest people to you is definitely the biggest lessons in terms of teaching you resilience. And you just have to be strong for other people, especially when you know that they need it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's harder when you're trying to balance the two, right? You're trying to be strong, support, while trying to show empathy. You know what I mean? That's a difficult situation. But that teaches you. That's an experience, right?
So when my grandma, I guess, when your mum was going through the mental health situation, did you know what type of mental health, or did you just see it within the actions that she was doing, or was she properly diagnosed?
We knew because at the time she had been to a doctor. So we knew she had those mental health issues. And it was difficult because we were trying to help her. And myself being at a young age at the time was trying to understand the whole situation because it involved the whole family. And being in a situation like that, even the psychiatrists even asked us as kids if we needed to talk through the situation. And I think mental health is obviously a large component of where we have to talk. And I think communication and talking is quite crucial for the person who is obviously going through that illness and the family who are trying to support that family member.
Yeah, talking is so important. And I think that's also why people recommend like journaling or something, because it's better than bottling it up, right? Like having it all inside and not sharing it anywhere. That's why, like, even if you don't want to talk to anyone, journaling, just talking, writing out your thoughts and
Yeah.
the problems that you're going through is better than keeping it all inside.
Yeah, that's true. And if you do have that support mechanism, it's handy to actually,
It's good to lean on it.
yeah, it's good to lean on other people and just talk it out. Because yeah, like exactly that. It's just, it's going to be stuck in your mind and it's just going to keep replaying, and then you're just not really going to move forward in any way, mentally, that is. So it's really important to really talk about it.
Yeah. So from these moments that we just shared, though, what was a particular type of resilience that you guys learned? Like, was it just to be strong for yourself, or was it to keep pushing forward, or what was it that you learned from these lessons?
Well, for me, I think it is pushing forward, taking that negativity out of your mind, having that mindset so that you don't feel that it's always you that's the problem. Making sure that I actually do agree with you with journaling. I actually did a lot of that. Particularly someone who didn't have a large cohort of family and friends at the time. Journaling was my go-to. I wrote everything down. That was for me to then write it down, focus on rethinking what I needed to bring out of my mind, to see what I needed to retrain my thoughts with the situation that I was in.
So what were just thoughts and what is actually the problem?
Correct, yeah. So trying to write it down, you can see, oh, okay. And you read it back, even if it's a few days later, you read it back.
And some thoughts are just like, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah,
correct. Yeah. And I actually still have that journal today.
That's good though.
Nice.
You can
Which
read
goes
back
back so many years, obviously with not just one situation, but I've been through a lot of circumstances. So I've actually still got that journal, and I read back on it today now, and I look at it and go, oh, what was I thinking at that stage? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you realize sometimes it's just immaturity sometimes, because you're just thinking all these things and you're like, shit,
or
why?
just rational.
Yeah, or just rational, and you're just like, wow,
But
why?
irrational. Is it irrational? Like when you're just thinking at the moment.
Irrational.
Irrational?
Thought. Yeah, irrational.
Yeah,
Yes.
irrational, yeah.
ESL.
Yeah, so it when you actually do read back, it's just like, wow, like what was I thinking, or what was really going through my mind? And you can clearly see, the bad thoughts and the good thoughts that you needed to fix. Because I remember I used to blog. I used to do self-reflection on blogging. So back, I think 10 years ago, it used to be a really big thing where
blogging in the 90s.
blogging, but it's like a
forum online.
it's like a forum
thing.
kind of blog thing, and I used to create just different events in my life at the time, whether it was something really small, buying car parts or something like that, to big moments. It was a good way for me to reflect on, the good moments as well as the bad moments. And it's good to have that there as a journal, because then you can reflect back exactly what you're saying, Mum, in the fact that you can just see the differences and how your mind is really thinking.
Well, I think it's also good. So say like today, you read back on those and you can actually see how far you've come, and you can also appreciate where you are now
100%.
and be really grateful for where you are and how far you've brought yourself. Because if you don't reflect and you don't think about these things, you may still be in that mode where you're like, oh, I don't have what I want. I'm not where I'm at. But then when you think of these things and where you've come from, you're like, no, I'm actually grateful for where I am today.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I do the same thing. So like chat logs. I don't know if you remember
yeah,
like MSN
those
Messenger.
MSN. I don't know. My mom would have MSN.
Well, I don't know if you remember
Not
that,
sure
but
of that.
yeah, they have these chat
Yeah.
apps where they save like your chat logs.
Yeah, I have the MSN ones.
Yeah, and I used to look back into how I used to type to people
Oh,
and reflect.
Big letter, small letters, and then E is a
Yeah,
3.
yeah. So I used to go back into my chat logs, because the reason why I used to do that is because I knew at the time when I was doing the reflection, my English wasn't that great in terms of structuring, punctuation, blah, blah, blah. So I used to look back and look at how I used to type to people, how I used to talk to people. And when you reflect back, you go, wow, like your maturity in terms of how you type, how you start the conversation, how you end the conversation.
I cringe at how mine used to look.
Yeah, so I learned a lot because I used to self-reflect through those means.
Yeah.
And it taught me so much about who I was back then. And then exactly what you're saying, Amelia, is like the whole thing about, you realize the difference between.
It's just appreciating how
Yeah,
far
yeah.
you've come.
Yeah.
But another thing on the resilience, I remember you telling us another form of resilience or moment was when you had to move back and forth from Australia and Hong Kong. So what happened in that situation and what did it teach you in terms of resilience?
I think what it taught me with that coming back to Australia from Hong Kong is having to learn to be more independent because my parents were not here on an ongoing basis. They were, particularly my mum at the time, was going back and forth. I think you needed to learn to be a strong person because you were the only person. Well, at the time, my sister was still in Hong Kong, so I was the only one here. So you had to adapt to the situation and the environment that you were in because at the time when I came back to Australia, I was living with my auntie who owned a restaurant business, so they were never at home.
You can relate. Your dad had a restaurant, right?
Well, yeah, but that was before my time. That was my sister's time.
Oh, okay, never mind. I retract that. Continue.
Yeah, so you had to adapt to the situation and actually build on your own resilience on certain circumstances.
I feel like that's so relatable to most Asians back in the 90s or even before then because most parents would be working late nights or working more than one job. And back then, a lot of us would just stay at home by ourselves. Like today when they're like, oh, kids that are under 12 years old shouldn't be at home by themselves. And all of us are just laughing because we were 4 years old and we were just at home by ourselves, just living life.
Yeah, I was making my own food when I was 5.
Yeah, we're making our own food, cup noodles, whatever it is. Like fend for yourself pretty much until they come home.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between the Asian culture in terms of the immigrants. Like for my family, like it was more so parents had to work. You just got to stay home because that's the only choice that you had, So you had to like really learn how to look after yourself.
Yeah, and it's just surprising to know that like now that I think back as well is even though we were to stay home by ourselves, we weren't doing anything where you're like tearing the house down or like setting things on fire. Like we actually knew that we had to be good and just live at home and just do your own thing kind of thing. We weren't doing anything that's like reckless.
Yeah, exactly that.
So just being mature, I guess, more mature than you probably would be at a typical 4 years old.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I agree. For a lot of maybe Asian families, kids had to grow up a lot faster and be more, act more mature because, well, a lot of families didn't have childcare or, put after school care and before school care. We were just left at home, if they were to work, long hours.
It's because childcare costs money.
Yeah.
Gotta save money.
Save every penny.
Save money. Yeah.
So another question I wanted to ask all of us is, was this resilience something that we had to build over time, or do you think that it's something that you guys always had?
I think it's a bit of both. I think, as I had mentioned, resilience, there's a level of resilience in everyone. And I think we're built in at a very young age that there is some level of resilience in us. It's just how much of it can we adapt resilience to? Everyone has a different level of resilience. Some take on resilience a lot easier than some others. They bounce back a lot better, which I think life experiences builds upon some people in learning that a lot better because they have more life experiences, because obviously life has a balance of, the darkness, which gives us light, and then you have sadness, but then you enjoy, the joyfulness of life.
I actually heard this one quote. I forgot the exact quote, but it's like, without darkness, you can't see the light. So that's why you need these challenges. So it's like the analogy saying like you need challenges to be able to appreciate the good things, which is what we were talking about during the journaling and what they were saying, like without dark, you can't see the light. Because if it's light all the time, you can't see where the light is, right?
But it makes sense though, right? It's just like you've got to really experience the negative to know what the positive is. And that's the same thing with, happiness and darkness and, you know what I
and
mean?
like batteries as well. Without the positive, you can't.
Have the negative.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
without the both, you can't charge anything.
It's
You can't
the
run
balance of chi, man.
Yeah.
You're going to have the negative and the,
Yeah, the yin and the
the
yang.
yang. Yeah, that's it.
All the Chinese idioms all coming out right now.
Yeah.
No, but
Damn.
it's the same. If you put it in an analogy, it's kind of like gymming and it's like training a muscle. Resilience is something that you can train too. Like when you first go in, your muscles aren't as strong, but the more you build on it, the more that you push through the heavy lifting, you become stronger. So I think that's kind of what your mind is like to build yourself to have better resilience.
It's the consistency.
Well, not consistency, but it's just the more you go through it,
Correct.
the better.
But the
you get.
consistency in terms of experience to learn, to build yourself on. Like it's like trying to build, improve your individual self is working on yourself to build you a stronger foundation.
And like at first when you go to gym, you might, pick up 2 kilo dumbbells and you're like, I can't do this. Over time, you're like, yeah, I can do this, or I can even move up now, I can do more. So it's like that with resilience. That's how I see it. Like you can just keep going through it, and the more you do it, the more you go through these challenges, the more you tell yourself you'll be fine.
Yeah, that relates to me because I just recently injured myself, but exactly that, could only do 2 kilos.
It was not 2 kilos, probably like 20 kilos. Cool story, bro. That was great. But do you think, Sam, that you built resilience over challenges, or do you think it's something that
Yeah, so I think I feel like it's a combination. I think it's a combination fried rice. I think it's a combination of challenges that you go throughout your life. That's part of your journey. That's how you learn. You make mistakes, blah, blah, blah. But I think from an Asian culture, I feel like the upbringing definitely had some indirect motivation or teaching of that skill through your parents, through the things that you were forced to do or whatever it was. Somehow, I personally feel like the Asian upbringing definitely had influence to resilience as a skill.
Yeah, when we were talking after Mike, I was going to say I disagree. I don't think that there was upbringing that taught me that. But after we discuss, I think, yeah, it's true. The reason why I was going to say no is because what we were saying, we were always at home by ourselves. We were all very independent. So it's like, who were we leaning on to teach us this thing? But that is the upbringing. That's the upbringing that we had that taught us how to do things for ourselves, how to fend for ourselves, and if things happen, how to think for ourselves.
Yeah, correct.
So I agree, like upbringing as well.
See, now you agree, hey?
Yeah, sorry, mate. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah.
Actually, you had an interesting story, the one where you got lost on the train or
Oh,
something
yeah.
when you were young, when you first moved to Australia.
Yeah, that's as a child. When I was in Sydney at the time, my parents were on the Sydney train and they had already got off. I can't exactly remember whether it was because it was busy or crowded, and I just got lost in the fact that I should have got off at that particular stop. So as a young child.
How old do you think you were?
I was probably about 4.5. So I had to think through the process. What am I going to do? Considering the fact I didn't really know English as well at that age. So I hopped off the train and somehow managed to work out that I needed to go across the other side and take the train back to the stop that my parents got off.
That's pretty good,
very
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, and I met them back.
Did they realize you were gone?
Oh, I think they were just in total panic mode, but just never thought that I would have thought of that.
Yeah, that's really
Because,
good at the
yeah,
4.5.
not being able to really speak English, and I don't know whether I could read any of the words, but back then we're talking late 60s or maybe early 70s.
Wow.
I don't know what level of platform signage there was at the time.
Were there trains in Hong Kong at the time that had something similar where you just cross the other side and catch it back? Was that something that you kind of recognized?
I don't think because even back then there wasn't even MTR.
Oh, wow.
So,
The ding ding.
yeah, no ding ding either.
Ding ding as in
It's
the
a
tram.
train.
These little tram things that you see in Melbourne, but Hong Kong version.
Oh, no, sorry, there was trams.
Wow.
That's interesting. Interesting how you found yourself back.
Yeah, so, that was something as a child you learnt to strategize.
That's impressive, especially at 4.5. I know most kids will probably just start crying.
Yeah.
Like, where's
Remember the
mommy?
kid that we saw yesterday and we were laughing because she was just standing in the fruit shop crying.
Which one? The little.
The girl that was just standing in the middle of the fruit
Oh,
shop
yeah.
crying.
Yeah,
But
like that.
it was like fake tear, the fake tear ones where no tears are coming
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're just like, eh.
Yeah, she probably was 4.5 too.
Yeah. Well, it's just amazing to see how some kids are able to find themselves and know what to
Yeah.
do and just not panic. Or they could be panicking, but they're just like, okay, I need to get myself out of this
It's
situation.
like natural instincts for them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's why to me, I feel like it can be natural too. Like whether or not it's maybe a passed down personality trait or something from your parents. Thanks, Mum, for the good genes.
I think it came from my dad. I was always a strong person. I never cried much.
Yeah, neither did I.
Yeah.
Can you agree that I didn't cry much?
No, I think you were the same. You never cried much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I think
impressive.
you're a lot different to your sister.
Yeah. If you heard it, she said it, not me.
She's more of a drama queen.
Yeah. I think to me, I feel there is some extent where it is like a personality thing that could be passed down. But yes, I agree that it's still something that you can build on as life teaches you these lessons to be more resilient.
Yeah, 100%. But it's strange, right? Like when you try and think about it, you think, oh, resilience is more of a skill thing. But then parents, in terms of their personality and character, for them to pass that down to their kids, that's pretty cool.
But they do say like when the mother is carrying the child, right, however their mindset was, like if they were strong or whatever it is, that is how like when the kid's born, they kind of take on a bit of that mental strength or the mindset or whatever you were carrying.
That's like
So-
during that period of having
carrying the baby. That's what I heard. I don't know if it's true or not, but
Well, it seemed like it worked for you.
Interesting.
But another story, this is something that I know. So you started studying a lot later than, the general social people who would study at like 18, whatever. And you started your career a bit later than other people. Were you ever worried or watching your peers growing up the career ladder? Were you worried and like comparing yourself to them, or were you always like focus in your own lane and like, I know that I can get to where I want to get to?
I think at that stage, I was just focused with myself because I was very determined at the time after the breakdown of the marriage. And I said to myself, okay, I need to do something about this, because I actually did go to uni at the very start in the mid-80s. It was just because of Mum passing away and then having to look after my younger sister. I had started uni, but it was becoming quite difficult because I was commuting from Brisbane, coming to the Gold Coast, working part-time at the casino back then. It was difficult, so I deferred and then didn't go back. So I was determined this time that I wanted to make something out of myself. I'm going back, so I said, what am I to study? I'd always been interested in health, but I knew I wasn't wanting to go into a degree where it was patient focused. So I went to an adults job market and I saw something called health information management. And I thought, yeah, I'm doing this, because it was so diverse. It wasn't just like your everyday accountancy, law. It had a bit of everything. It had a bit of medical, IT, business management. And so I thought, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And that was my goal.
Nice.
And at the time, you were still in Brisbane. And I think you've been brought up to be a strong person as well, because we had those challenges when we were in RunCon at the time.
I don't remember.
You don't remember that?
Apparently, I had to walk down
you-
like many miles and I never cried, and it was hot and sweaty, and I just stayed quiet and just held her hand and walked home. That's all I remember you telling
the
me.
neighbours always said, this child is so good. How can you get up so early, get this child up, walk, because we didn't have a car at the time. So we walked at least, would have been 20 minutes at least to the
Jeez.
nearest bus stop.
That's a far walk.
Yes.
20 minutes.
For a little kid.
Yeah, and another story during that time is every time it rained, it flooded at this particular sort of like a park near the units we were living. So we always had to go through at least probably good 6-7 inches of rain. We would walk through that because that was the only way to get through.
Wow.
So me and Amelia had to go through this rain.
I do not remember.
Yeah. But no, and I think that sort of built up Amelia as well, being a stronger person, what she had to go through at the time.
Yeah, as a kid.
Yeah. So I think, we learned from those experiences, and particularly for me, I learned so many experiences which made me a stronger person and a more confident person. I must say, I was not a confident person when I was young. I think through experiences, I've become a stronger and confident person, not just through personal life, but through work as well. And I think that has led me to where I am today.
So tell us a little bit about where you are today in your job, because you did say like being in management and leadership as an Asian woman in Australia as well.
At the start, I must say it was hard being Asian and being an Asian woman in my industry at the time. There wasn't a lot of Asians in my field.
Asians in general?
Asians in general. It's a profession which not a lot of people are familiar with, and a lot of people, ask me, what is health information management? But it was difficult because I had to climb up that ladder and start from the bottom.
And did you feel like you had to prove your worth too?
Yes, I definitely had to prove my worth, but at the same time, I think I was fortunate enough because I built my confidence. I also built on the fact of learning to communicate with the right people.
Yeah.
As I said, I wasn't a confident person, but I built on that, and I got to know a lot more people, go out there and talk a lot more with people and get myself out there so that people knew who I was.
Yeah, so to build your confidence though, did you think that was built through these resilient and through the challenges, or did you specifically work on building your confidence through other means?
I think it was a bit of both. And also, my dad always said, always build on your education, regardless on your age. So I think that was also a part to play. So having to build on that whilst I was still having a family and making those difficult choices where Amelia actually had to go back to Canberra whilst I was studying. I suppose I went back after I did my bachelor and continued to do my master's, and I have done, little bits of other short courses in certificates as well. So I've always continued to expand my skills.
No, that's really good.
Yeah, I believe in that though. Like I think no matter what age it is, no matter what it is, you always have to continue to learn to keep building whatever it is, if it's in the same industry, same field, or if it's completely something new.
Yeah, of course, 100%. But Mum, just dialing it back, you said you studied during the time when you're looking after your younger sister. What were you studying at that time?
Oh, at that time, I actually was offered to go do a Bachelor of Nursing. But back then, it was a lot different because nursing back then was in-house, in the hospital. So it wasn't actually a degree in a university or tertiary institution.
Right.
It was training done in the hospital.
So like practical.
So you were accepted into the hospital to do that.
That's pretty
training.
good.
So it has changed a lot since.
Was that relatively hard to get in at the time?
It wasn't relatively hard. Well, I suppose for me, it's just a bit like now where it was in demand.
Right, okay.
So it wasn't, as long as you had a reasonably good score from your high school senior, then you would possibly be able to get in.
Geez, it sounds like it hasn't really changed in terms of the demand. Because that's still the issue nowadays is there's not enough medical staff.
Yeah, well, for most of the listeners that's listened to our podcast for a while would know that my parents are actually divorced. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of after divorcing and then having to put yourself out there again, How did you find resilience in terms of finding love again?
It was difficult because going through the pain with, your divorce, and with me and a background of my own family having had divorce, in my mind, I always wanted to have that perfect family. Having to go through that again, it definitely made me a stronger person because I had to move on in life and find that courage and niche where it made me think I could do this. And I think one of the reasons why it also encouraged me to move forward was you as the kids was my major thing in my life that made me to go forward and say, okay, could I or should I find love again?
Mm.
I think also it was wanting to get companionship. That was my main thing. And my other main thing in finding love again was ensuring my kids would be able to accept the new love in my life. That was a crucial factor in finding love again.
Yeah.
I've heard many, many stories in terms of couples who've married, who divorce, and then they're having to reset again. That they find it very hard because
To go back out in the world.
to go back out and expose themselves, or just have the confidence to really go out there and be like, hey, I need to find a companion or a new love or something like that. And they find it difficult because they feel like because of their age at the time, they feel like they couldn't really get that exposure.
And it's also because they've pretty much been with someone for 10 years or something like
Yeah.
that. So technically they haven't dated or seen the dating world in that long. So it's like you going back out there, you're like, what do I do? Where do I start?
Yeah.
So that's what we wanted to understand. How did you feel at that time outside of, so you worked yourself out, now you're ready to go back out again. Did you just have to psych yourself up and be like, I can do this, I'm confident enough, like I can find someone? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, I think it was psyching myself up. And I think being a strong person as I was what drove me to go, okay, I need to find someone. It wasn't exactly having to have love, but it was companionship. And I was driven to think that I felt lonely at times. And so I had that resilience in me to think I have to go forward, tackle this, hopefully find someone. But at the time, I had a lot of things going on at the same time because I was still studying. So really, I wasn't thinking at the time of wanting to find someone, but I knew I wanted companionship. But that was not actually
not a priority.
No,
Yeah.
that was not my priority. I think it just
happened, yeah.
It just happened.
Well, they say that when you
I wasn't looking.
It's
for
when
it.
you don't look, that's when you manage to find
It's when things
one.
happen, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So after a big chat of talking about resilience, we did some research and there's actually this thing called 5 pillars of resilience.
5 fingers of death, mate.
5 Cheeto fingers of death. I'm just going to read it. So there's self-awareness, mindfulness, self-care, positive relationships, and purpose. So they say that people who are able to use these 5 are people who are really resilient and that have, that just strong capability of bouncing back. So I want to discuss with all of us, like a roundtable discussion, to see, do you think you use all of these, or is there one that you lean towards more?
There's a number of those 5 pillars that I would lean against, not just one. Certainly, self, was it self-help? Was it
Self-care and
self-help?
self-awareness.
Yeah. I think that
Kelpie dog.
Yes.
So positive self-talk.
Yeah, definitely positive self-talk, because that then sets your mind at a better state. That then makes you move forward and focus on a pathway.
So the purpose.
Yeah. You have a purpose. You set that goal, which means in life you have a lot of circumstances where you need to use a couple of those 5 pillars. So I don't think it's just one.
Yeah.
You usually have all 5. It could be all 5, definitely.
No, I agree. I think definitely use all 5 because that's what the definition is. For someone or a person who are able to use all 5, then they have a good sense of resilience within themselves. But I would say how I would use it is similar to how I described the description of resilience, is just being able to see the light. So to me, the first pillar that I would definitely use is self-care in terms of positive self-talk. If I'm in a challenging situation, I'm never going to be like, oh my God, this is so hard. This is blah, 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 blah. It's okay, what do we need to do? This is fine. We can get out of this. And that's always the first thing that comes to my head. Then that leads into self-awareness or mindfulness and just being able to know that, yeah, this is a tough situation, but now what do I need to do? And how do I make myself better or build on these weaknesses that I have to get out of this or to be stronger or whatever it is, and being self-aware and being mindful, and then having that purpose, which is just moving out of this situation that I'm in.
Damn. Well, I call this the 5 fingers of death because for you guys that listen to freestyle rapping, that's where I got it from.
I don't know how.
I was watching it last night. I don't know how this related to it. It's random, but the 5 pillars, I believe I utilize all 5. And I think in all aspects in life, you do in some way and form, whether it's at that moment or after that moment. Because, yeah, like for me, I always rely on what's that relationship one?
Positive
relationships. I like to listen to others. I like to ask the question. I like to hear other people's opinions because I feel like hearing a third perspective is always a good perspective, whether they agree with you or if they don't. If they see a different angle, that's going to give you a perspective, right? But then I feel like the self-care, self-awareness and mindfulness all come in one component because you need to reflect. You need to recalibrate and you need to also understand what situation you're in and where you need to get to. Then that leads to your purpose, which is what's your true intent. What are you trying to get out of and what you're trying to get to? If you have those clearly aligned, they all come together naturally.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so I can see how the 5 pillars work.
5 pillars of 5 fingers of death.
So coming to a wrap up, we had a really good chat on how to build good resilience and just talking through how we work through challenges. But Mom, give our listeners your top 3 personal advice on how to build on resilience.
There probably is more than 3, but top 3, certainly self-awareness in the fact communication. If you have those circumstances where you are unable to work it out yourself, try to communicate with someone, discuss it. And whether that is having to organise seeing a psychiatrist, it's not an embarrassment these days. It's actually quite common that people need to talk about it because not everyone may have close family or friends which they feel comfortable to talk things through. So that's one. Secondly is be kind to yourself. Don't feel so negative when things occur and make sure that, your mindset is there's a reason to why things sometimes occur and see that light at the end of the tunnel.
It could be a blessing in disguise,
Yeah, it certainly can. Yes. As I say, majority of the time there is a reason why, these things occur.
Yeah, things happen for a reason.
And thirdly, be positive and be able to bounce back and learn from your experiences. I think learning from the experiences in your lifetime actually drives you to being able to adapt to circumstances, difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I think those are really good tips. I'd probably give something quite similar. Was there something that you would give?
Yeah, similar. I think, you've got to self-reflect, but also understand and comprehend those mistakes and moving forward from that. And what Mum said, the biggest thing is the talking to someone, especially with a psychiatrist. I think that's the biggest emphasis here is a lot of people don't. And that's what we realize too. In everyone that we've spoken to, everyone has also always said that talking to a psychiatrist is one of the most helpful things. And there's that social stigma where it's a scary thing or it's a bad thing.
Or you're psycho.
Yeah, or you're crazy, but really you're not because we're human. We need to talk to people and seek that professional help.
One thing I think I would like to add to this tip is think of a bigger picture. Like things may be going wrong or things are going wrong towards you, but think of it, did you do something wrong? Like maybe there's something that you could have built on. For example, I like to bring this example in terms of my career, like starting in design and my very first agency that I worked at, and the boss was like, no, your work is not good. I can't show this to a client. And it's like, rather than being like, why is my boss attacking me? Why is blah, blah, blah? It's like, okay, having a look at your work and be like, can I actually do better? And see the things that like you're doing at that current point in time, and accepting that, yeah, your work is not up to scratch, and what do you need to do, and where do I need to go to study or do more work or add more hours here to do better.
Yeah.
So rather than being like, oh, that person's like just being a shitty person towards me, or like, why am I always the victim? It's just thinking, why are you always in this situation then? Is there something that you're doing that and puts yourself in this situation? So rather than putting your blame towards other people, try and think if there's something that you can do yourself
within you,
to build yourself to do better next time.
And I think it's okay to if you fuck up or if you're wrong, it's totally fine. You just need to learn from that fuck up and mistake.
Yeah.
That's the only way that you're going to learn and move forward.
It's like relationships. Some people always end up with players and they're like, why am I always in this situation? And you think about, is there a certain trait that you lean towards that might be giving you these type of partners?
Just like them bad boys, man.
Yeah, you
You
know?
just like them bad boys. So.
That's just an example, but that's what one tip I would want to add is there something that you can work on yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Not only the fact that we accept the fact there's failures, we learn from them. And that actually, building on the topic of resilience, actually helps us in our jobs as well to face those criticisms that may come towards you in your job.
Yeah.
So that was a really beautiful chat with my mum. I have never talked to her like that, and also never talked to her in English like this. So it's definitely interesting, but I have learned a lot personally. And hopefully the ones out there who are looking to build on their resilience, hope you have learned something out of this too.
Yeah. Thank you again, guys, for tuning in, and we will join you in the next one. But once again, thank you, Mum, for joining
No
us.
worries.
It's
Thank
been
you
a
for
pleasure.
inviting me.
Thank you. And we're going to have lunch. Bye.
Peace.